Thanks very much. This is our final session of the day, a session I'm super excited about. I love talking about the future and where we're going as an industry and as a group. So I recruited these three gentlemen on purpose for this session because I think I've worked with all of them at various times in my career. They've all had great insight about where the industry is, where the industry is going. And I'm really excited to sort of hear their thoughts about this. So closest to me here, this is Aubrey Stork. Aubrey is the CRM Digital Insights and E-commerce Manager or Program Director at Roberge Productions. You've probably seen and heard one of their commercials or emails around. I actually learned something about Aubrey I didn't know about. Ben actually told me this. You created the one-on-one date night? Yes. Or the emails for that? So it's a
microphone actually uses.
Yes, can you give us just a little bit about that? I watched the video on YouTube and I thought it was actually a fantastic program that you put together. So.
Sure. Okay. So the idea behind this promotion, I guess, it was for a show that we had a couple years ago called Once. Anyone here see that show when I was in town? So you have a theater audience. Anyways, the show is about basically a friendship, effectively, that forms between this man and a woman over a 1 week period, and how they bond over music and that sort of thing. So the idea was to try to do this sort of thing in our audience and bring people together through the music, through the show, and that sort of thing. So what we did was we had a date night where basically simply by submitting a form with basic information about yourself, your gender, your age, what it was you were looking for, and those same sort of terms. And we randomly set people up based on that information. They would come to the show. We'd give them a ticket and say, you're sitting next to Matt or whoever it happened to be. Good luck. Anyways, the evening was quite successful and a lot of fun. And it resulted in one marriage, at least, that we know of.
There you go.
Yeah, so
Data at work.
Free pass to heaven.
So I thought that was amazing. I wanted to share it because I thought it was a great program and really interesting use of their audience as well as their physical locations to have people come to the show, as well as simple data manipulation to sort of pair people together with that. And I thought it was very forward thinking and something sort of out of the box. Like I would never think that Mirvish would do something like that. But when I heard about it, I was like, I have to tell this story. I have to get Aubrey's side. So thank you for telling me about that. I thought that was fantastic. Sitting next to Aubrey, we have Ariel Roberge. He's the country manager, president for Symplify Canada. I've known Ariel for a long time. He was actually a client of mine 10 years ago-ish, at least. Yeah, probably. So we have a long history, and he's worked with some great brands. You might have heard of one or two of them: France Telecom, Aeroplan, Intact Insurance, Desjardins. So he's got a long history of working with very large data sets. And really using that data to plan and move those programs forward. Do you want to just introduce a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Toronto, for having us over. I know there's a small contingency of Montrealers that came to the summit. This is a really, really great event. Thanks. Oops. Watch well, it's interesting because when I sort of fell into the email marketing world, which is today is just exploding beyond email. It wasn't necessarily by choice. It was almost by accident, but it was one of the best accidents that happened to me, in the sense that in the previous panels, somebody was saying that there's so much more to this than just sending an email. So when I kicked this off, I was coming from a sort of consulting and startup background, and when I started, a lot of my close friends, would call me the spam king, and I said, no, this is way beyond this. And I really took the time to change that perception with a lot of people in my network and a lot of friends. And today, I'm actually occasionally sit with some actual data scientists, people doing their PhDs in machine learning, who actually now they're interested in our data. Like, oh, this is there's a lot of data there. So it's a great moment to be in this industry, and it's really, I really appreciate being here with all of you. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
I got one. I got my own.
At the far end, in the hot pink shirt, Scott actually told me today is anti-bullying day officially, so pink shirt.
Pink shirt.
Cool.
Showing support. Scott has a small child, and schools, and they're really supportive for this initiative. So, my background with Scott is I first met Scott when he was a consultant. He was working with some of our clients. He eventually became my boss for a period of time, which was great.
Awesome.
It was actually. I'm an amazing employee. Oh, sorry, Scott's a great boss too.
A lot of people don't know that.
But so Scott's worked with a ton of different industries, and as the president of Vigorate Digital, he continues to work with some very large brands in Canada, U.S. clients, and he's worked retail, media, consumer packaged goods, software, automotive, financial services. And back in the day, Scott used to drive motocross.
No.
Not motocross?
Road race.
Road race. Sorry, I was close. Motorcycles. Should have just said motorcycles, but
Motocross guys are crazy.
so, he's back in his youth. He was certainly a bit of a daredevil that way, and I've seen him work with clients, and he carries some of that energy and enthusiasm into his business. So, do you want to have a minute?
I don't know how much more I can add to that. I have been at this a little while. I joined my first email marketing company in 1999 when email was going to be brand new, and it was super exciting, and it was going to be a great marketing channel one day. It does not make me old, it makes me a visionary. So we're clear on the terminology. And yeah, I've been in Canada and the US. I worked for American companies, worked for Canadian companies. I worked out in London, England for a little while. So all kind of centered on email, CRM, database, one-to-one. Actually, prior to joining an email marketing company, I worked at Xerox in database marketing when personalized marketing meant that the mail that made it to your house with your insurance statement had your name on it. And we used reel-to-reel tape to do that. So yeah, I've seen a little bit go by in the industry, but I would echo the comments that this is an amazing time, because I think the realization of things that we've been talking about for a long time is primed and ready now, and I think that it's a great time to be in this industry.
I think that kind of answers my first question as well, beyond just the introduction. So I'm gonna jump right in. So Aubrey, we're gonna start with you here, and you're being on the brand side, and focusing a little bit different than Ariel and Scott. When you're looking at how email evolves over the next few years, and sort of how Mirvish is going to capitalize on some of the things maybe we talked about today, AMP and voice and email and things like that. Where do you see sort of the future of email in the entertainment space or in general?
I think it was touched on definitely in the last session, and I think even Scott touched on it as well, where it's things have already evolved from just email to CRM, and evolving a little bit more than the one channel that is email. So I think we're going to see that accelerate. Just I guess a sort of anecdote. One of my much younger cousins in her 20s. We were organizing a Secret Santa over the holidays, and asked for our boyfriend of about a year and a half, asked for his email address so we can include him in the festivities. She said, let me get back to you, I'm going to have to ask him. She didn't have his email address, right? So this is a different generation where they're using different channels and that sort of thing. But that's not bad news, I don't think, because I think, again, as has been touched on and alluded to here, is that the skills and the data and the information and knowledge that we've gained over the years, I think is more applicable than ever before. It's just the where we apply it might change a little bit, but. Yeah, so I think we're going to see some fragmentation, I guess, of the channels and how we reach people. But again, I think all the things that we're talking about today, leveraging the data we have available to us, and understanding our customers better and all that. And I think that's will continue to serve us and serve us well.
Sure. Do you have anything you want to add? Please feel free.
Yeah.
No, feel free.
Well, it's interesting because I have two boys, 8 and 12, and they actually use email, but their main use is to get the notifications from Fortnite. And they forward those back to me, and I'm like, sounds 40.
All the way to 210 before someone mentioned Fortnite.
Yeah, so that's how strong the channel is. To them, it was the engagement to that platform was email. Obviously, they're living in another communication sphere, which is the game platform on which you're playing, but that's quite interesting. So now when I send them pictures and stuff by email, they actually appreciate it. I send them stuff from here. It's in the new postcard. Yeah, that's it. I don't think. Yeah, so email's not dead for sure. I think it's changing, evolving, and you touched this morning on a few items with AMP and stuff like that. I think we're going to see the platforms. Google's dominating, or they really they embraced it and they jumped on it at a speed that's almost. We see the trend, the shifts in the lists are happening fast, right? People. So no, I think that just to add to your comment, I think the channels are really interesting. And it's interesting to see how a 1.0 type technology is still very, very relevant in a 2 and 3.0 world. So it's
But yeah, I would say I've seen lots of diagrams where email is still sort of stuck in the center because you can't have an account here without an email. You can't have you can't have a PlayStation Network account without an email. You can't have
exactly. The wall gardens that the social media, the social networks tried to create, and they're not so they're not so persistent. They don't really translate through certain generations and even what's certain countries, like there's different areas where Facebook just isn't available. So that's it.
Sure, right. It's hard to topple like the 3 billion person social network.
That's it.
Scott, did you have something?
I think there's a couple things I would say, and even touching on how people use email today. The phases of email and what was going to be the next email killer, I'd like to think future-wise we're past that and nothing's going to be the next email killer anymore. But when we look at 10 years ago, if we consulted with a client, we would say to them, when you compete for attention in the inbox, you're competing against mom and dad. You're not competing against the people that you sell against. That was 10 years ago. But then, and 5 years ago, that changed where mom and dad moved to Facebook and everybody moved to social and you were getting a different type of interaction. So the marketer began to dominate the inbox again. And that made it more cluttered, and that thankfully put an emphasis back on relevancy and those things. But that's the thing that we're seeing, like the gated for the PSN network and things like that. Marketers and companies have a little more control over the inbox as a form of communication now than with people moving to other channels for the more socialized side of the communication. So I think that has changed, and I think that we're reaping the benefits of that now, and I think that'll inform the future of what email is. The other thing I would say is more, I think culturally, the comments around, oh, you work in email, you must be spam. I don't see that very much anymore. I think that's changed. I hope to God that's changed. I hope I never hear it again. But the culture around email as a consumer is different. There's studies that say people that sign up for retail communications want more communications from them, as long as they're relevant, but they want more, not less. So again, that speaks to the competition in the inbox. But I also think culturally within organizations, we see people looking at email not as a channel, but as the hub of an engagement model, right? And that's different. And seeing email used to be the end result of all the data work that got done upstream got dumped into the email channel for deployment. But now the email data is making it back upstream to inform what those decisions should be. So I think, beyond any of the technology changes and things like that, I think one of the big things that we're queued up for is a lot of the cultural change has been accomplished on email. It hasn't all been implemented, but I think a lot of it's been accomplished and the momentum is different now than it was.
Great. So I'm going to sort of switch gears instead of talking about like the actual messaging. Ariel, you guys are building your platform. It's one of the newer platforms in the space. There's the name's newer, I should say. The actual technology has probably been around a bit longer than my brain's recalling at the moment. But where do you see the tech you're building? Like, how do you plan? What you're building today is what you're releasing next year. What you're planning for next year is something that you're building the year after. Those types of things. How do you forecast the need for change and the need for new tools that your clients are going to want to, that just Phil said earlier, the shiny object, right? What's the next shiny object in email, and how do you plan for that so it's not just a fad?
Yeah. So we've actually been around since 2000. So it's we're we've changed names for the first time actually formally last year.
You're just this much newer than Scott.
But when men joined us, I thought, oh, you predate our CPO, right? So, but the one thing when I jumped on board about 8 years ago, the due diligence I did as somebody that came from the startup universe, I wanted to make sure that we were not stuck in a technology paradigm, that we were constantly evolving. So the good news is our development team, mostly based out of Sweden, but now in Montreal, and we're growing it across the globe, really is about staying on top of the thing. That's why we've been around so long. If I had to, obviously the word on everybody's lips at the moment is AI. AI is absolutely, in our product group, it's one of the most, it's the discussion we have regularly. We actually have strategies behind it. The hard part with AI at the moment is to really find what the benefit is with regards to how much you will invest into it. So we were talking about testing and the value of testing, and when you get sometimes 3% or 2% more, in general, at least from our understanding, when we speak about integrating AI with the platform and using it at different levels within the tool, we're talking about a 1, 2, maybe 3% gain overall. This is what we can get out of it today. So the investment needs to be consequential. We're being very cautious because there's a lot of buzz and there's a lot of things that are the shiny objects that we're like, and then we realize, that's really just not mature enough yet. So trying to think 2-3 years in the future. Obviously, we have it on the roadmap. We actually, we've been talking about this for years now, but we actually came up with one of our core strategies just a few weeks ago in a session where we've been building foundations. Now we actually have a product approach to it. And surprisingly enough, it's not, full-blown machine learning automation. It's really starting at the beginning with what our customers are asking us for. So we're focused on that. The other thing that's definitely changing is the input and outputs from different sources. So if you think of a customer journey, and let's say you're a car manufacturer that has a connected car. Let's just call it the Internet of Things, but some things are bigger than others, right? A few moments ago, I got a text telling me that my car was fully charged. And I'm getting emails with status from my car. Now, these are very basic engagement points, but if you think about it, the way you will interact with your objects will create new data points, and the way the marketers will want to reach out to you will be, based on that interaction. So the whole, let's call it the open API or the open universe, these new data sources and these new interactions in real time. That's really where we're heading, and I think that's really exciting. That's what gets me up in the morning. And of course, we're not there fully yet, but we can do stuff. There's actually good connection points. Somebody mentioned Zapier. Zapier's really cool. It's like we've decided we have an initial implementation. We're going full in. Like we've decided this is where we want to invest it. And there's other connectors, but obviously the goal of that is to really expand the ecosystem. So as we're moving forward, the ecosystem is becoming more complex, more data points are being captured. Of course, there's the whole privacy part of this. That's a whole what do you call it? The Pandora's box. But if I look at it really from the technology point of view, this is probably, we're at our genesis. We're about to do much more in a short period of time. So yeah, stay tuned.
Great. Scott, how about from like a strategy point of view? I know that a lot of times you and I have talked strategy in the past, and how are you looking at the 3-year strategy, the 5-year strategy, with things like AI on the horizon, and or in some cases they're here for subject matter automation, for those types of things. Where does that fit in sort of the strategy side as opposed to the technology side?
A lot of it still comes down, I think this got mentioned a little bit earlier before, it's making sure that the strategy is focused on not what you want to do, but what you want to accomplish. And as long as that's the root of everything that we do on the strategy side, the good news is the technology now is better than it's ever been. The product companies in general do a great job of building. The challenge is actually leveraging it is more of a challenge than anything else. The comment I made earlier about the moving of a MarTech, like making a change of a MarTech system, it is a big undertaking. We're finding that the strategy around what we're trying to accomplish, it drives not only what you're going to implement, but it drives a more realistic evaluation of your MarTech stack as a whole. And I think that's a big concept that we look at. I know it sounds operational, but when we're looking at the strategic side of what we're trying to accomplish, it's taking the MarTech stack into consideration, not the marketing automation engine or the content management engine or any of those things. Because what we're trying to accomplish ultimately is going to cross more than one system. It does every single time. So from a product development and the making the products talk to each other, which again is better now than it's ever been, whether you go on a full stack solution or a best of breed solution, whatever it is, the ability to make the solutions talk to each other is better than it's ever been. But getting the most out of it is harder and harder. So a lot of that comes back down to the strategy side of what are you trying to accomplish? When we throw things on the whiteboard, it's not about message 1 goes out and then you wait 2 days and see if anybody opened it. That's not a strategy. It's an execution plan, but it's not a strategy. So things like AI, understanding that AI isn't the be all and end all, it doesn't replace people, right? There's still the thinking that goes into the data that gets fed into an AI engine. There's still a sanity check of the data sometimes that's coming out of an AI engine or machine learning or whatever term you want to call it. So we try strategically. Sometimes it's hard because it's fun to get on the whiteboard, draw whatever you want and imagine it. But if we don't have a good view of what we're actually trying to accomplish, then the technology is not going to matter. The data is not going to matter. AI and whatever other hot buzzword you want to attach to it isn't going to matter. It needs to be rooted back into what are we trying to accomplish, because chances are we can, as long as we know what it is, or at least have. And I don't want that to sound like a final statement. It might just be the direction we're going is what we want to accomplish. That's enough strategically to be able to look at it. That informs your testing models, that informs your MarTech stack, that informs all kinds of decisions that you have to make. So I think that I think that cultural change has happened as well, of people not as much saying email 1, email 2, email 3. What happens if they don't open email 3? Well, they're vaporized after that. They had 3 chances. Why would we send them 4? What are we trying to accomplish? And that goes back to my comment of email as a hub of an engagement strategy, not as an email strategy per se.
Great, that actually flows really nice into our next question.
You're welcome.
You did that on purpose. So talking sort of about that strategy evolution, when we were setting up the panel and talking, we talked about, a lot of people don't necessarily have the data they need right now to be at the place that they're predicting, right? Not everyone's nearly advanced data as a skills program at Gap Adventure or G Adventure, because they've been building it for a long time. What data points, how does data need to evolve for companies now so they can get to that point? This was
Sure. And I'm glad you asked me that while I have a microphone and Aubrey doesn't, because I told Aubrey I was going to steal what he told me to answer the question.
We set this up before.
Yeah. We had a great discussion with the 4 of us the other day, and a lot of what we try to focus on, and this is where I'm going to give Aubrey the credit, because whether he invented it or not, he reminded me of it. The concept of big data versus small data. and the big data being the buzzword of everybody trying to get. We've got clients that have terabyte after terabyte after terabyte in their data lake, but from a engagement marketing perspective, how much of that data is actually really valuable? That's where we got into the conversation of where small data is important, and people who've been on a quest for big data have sometimes ignored the data that they actually have. And the ability to take maybe 2 or 3 small data points and smash them together, and you're actually pretty close to the big data point that you wanted. So having people look more at the data that's available, mapping that against the data that, or the strategy of what are we trying to accomplish. And don't worry too much about getting the biggest data lake. It used to be everyone on the biggest subscriber list, and then we realized, hey, 80% of those people don't actually read anything you send them. So, and Matt's heard me say this before, people would ask me what's the best way to improve open rates? Get rid of the 60% who don't open anything. Your open rates would be spectacular, right? You'd be just a champ. So I think that conversation and that we had around the concept of small data, I would encourage people to look at the data that you have and look at maybe 2 or 3 data points that actually create the bigger data point or close to the bigger data point that you were going for. A lot of people can accomplish a lot more with the data that they have versus the data they think they want. I also think that informs the strategy of acquiring more data. And again, back to the concept of what you want to accomplish and what I think we see is people moving forward. When we're mapping out an engagement model, we're looking at what do we want to accomplish? Here's the data we have, here's the data we need. We can make the data we need out of the data we have, or we can go acquire the data that we need. That's not a big data strategy. Again, to coin the phrase that Aubrey either invented or reminded me of, that's a small data strategy, but it can be massively effective, especially some comments were made earlier about sometimes you just got to get going. The small data strategy gets you going, right? Even if you don't have the big data that you need, the small data can accomplish so much that you don't think that it can. So we really encourage people to map small data against what you want to accomplish and worry about getting the big data over time.
All right, do you have anything you want to add to that since Scott stole your term?
But I get credit for it.
That's true. I just want to say that I couldn't have said it better myself.
I love Aubrey's stories.
I mentioned it briefly earlier, but over 330 million people around the world have some type of vision disability. When you're looking at it, I don't necessarily know your audience, but I have a feeling that it's not necessarily a bunch of teenagers going to the theater, maybe some shows, but it's probably a bit of an older audience, a more mature audience, and some of those people are more likely to have vision or some type of disability. How do you plan for that with the Mirvish systems when you're designing your platform and you're designing your emails to account for those types of changes of the aging population?
We are in line with AODA. We are paying close attention to everything that we do in terms of all of our communications, our website, and that sort of thing. By 2021, I believe it is, need to be compliant, AA compliant, and we're on the road to getting there. If you're not, it's just you start looking into it. But I think what's really interesting is how the timing sort of worked out with things like AI and voice, as you alluded to, because I think you can accomplish more than one thing at a time. When you start looking at these things, so making sure that your email communications are legible and all that, but also that a reader, for instance, is going to read everything in the right order and that sort of thing. If and or when voice becomes or plays a more dominant role in the email marketing that we do. Again, I think making sure that your emails are created in such a way that they're easily read and interpreted. Again, we'll achieve both of those things for you.
Great. Ariel, are you planning to build tech to do voice recognition?
I am now. Well, recently Alexa started reading emails, so that sort of opened a whole new dimension to how you create your email, and if you really want to be read by I'm sure Google's going to follow, certainly in Apple for sure. So we have clients that send emails that are fully image driven. they're tagged though, as Mike was alluding to before, so we start tagging to capture metadata, but this actually means we do need to start enriching these emails with much more content. It's not just tags, because tags would be really dry if Alexa starts reading tags to you. But so the as the one part that many email marketers sort of left aside for a long time was the text version. They just ignored it. Our platform allows you to integrate that, but it's one of the validation steps. Most people just skip it. That's why. So this is actually where we are foreseeing some use of AI to help you actually analyze the image and probably give you a short description and really help the marketers instead of them producing that extra content, they'll just mostly be validating that it makes sense to human beings. That's really our focus at the moment for accessibility. Now, of course, we've some clients that actually have accessibility committed people that actually take the entire email and write behind it. Those are truly committed to and that's because their audience is obviously part of that target. But I do foresee that probably some of the early uses of AI in a production environment will be to leverage the existing tools that can do some, exactly.
Great. I know this is actually a big discussion in the Email Geek Slack too. There's an entire group of people focusing just on how to build accessible email, sharing tips, sharing information. The Email Experience Council as well, which is an ANA group from the US. They're working on a guide to help you build better emails as well from an accessible point of view. So over the last 2 years, it's been a rather large focus. So certainly something to think about or something to look into if you're not focusing on it now in your new programs. I think you're missing out on a rather large audience. Scott, so it's oftentimes, and I think the panel we had this afternoon around left hand, right hand, not always talking, not always knowing what they're doing, maybe not working together to build those relevant emails. How do you break down those silos when you're working with a customer who maybe has multiple groups that you're working with or interacting with, or multiple business channels even with competing priorities?
It's really hard. I think you guys live and breathe this every day, I'm sure. The cultural change around some of these things is the hardest part. I don't know, is anybody here on the B2B marketing side? So you hear the ABM phrase all the time, and that it's kind of cropped up again, and it's a major thing. The cultural change around ABM is massively harder than the technology change around ABM. Getting sales and marketing groups to talk to each other as peers, if not equals, that change is harder. So when we're working with groups to do that, I know I sound like a broken record a little bit, but it's coming back to what are we trying to accomplish? And if we work, especially in ABM, we look at sales and marketing trying to accomplish that same thing, then that gets more people bought in. But like a lot of things, when you're looking at cultural change, you have to pick a couple small things that you can try to get a win with, right? You can't take a major selling organization, a major marketing organization, and say, tomorrow you're best friends, and now you work together. And everybody goes, oh, it was easy. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. But there's usually a couple of champions that you can find on each side that realize that they can benefit from it. So whether it's B2B or B2C, like that same silo breaking down, if there's not a common goal between the two, we kind of gone through this process with a couple of clients where we talk about the readiness to do something, the access to the information to do something, and most importantly, the willingness to do it. So when we look at companies that have to cross silos and cross organizations, if they can't check all three boxes, it's going to be a massive uphill climb. And so finding a couple of small wins and usually a couple of champions within the group who are willing to be outliers for a little while so they can prove the model is often what we end up having to do.
So just as a follow-up then, like companies that are maybe not recognizing this or failing to execute on this, how much harder is this diversified marketing effort going to be in the future for them?
Yeah, I don't think, and again, I don't want to make it sound like it's not happening. I think it is happening. to do that. I think it's happening all over the place. And I think some companies are better than others at their ability to do it. People younger than myself, I can't speak for anyone else here, are coming up through organizations that actually started without the silos. And so I think that's helping the cultural change to be able to do it. A comment got made earlier in one of the sessions about the cost of not doing something. And I think with data being so much better understood for not just email marketing, but all engagement channels, I think that the ability to quantify the cost of not doing something is really helping with that type of scenario as well, to be able to say, like, this is the win we think we can get, but here's the loss if we don't actually do it. And that often creates those champions that are willing to step out of line a little bit and maybe take on a couple things.
I was just gonna say, I wonder if this is a situation where something like the centralization of data can help that. So all you need to agree on across the aisle and all that is what your major goals are, as we've sort of suggested, and with that business rules. We're only contacting this person this many times, whatever the case is, and then as long as everyone if you have your data centralized and it's almost self-regulating if you've accomplished that.
And I think that changes organization to organization. Again, people that have come up in organizations that don't have silos, those are the people that are taking advantage of what the future opportunities are. I think one of the challenges for large and more established organizations, when Aubrey talks about the business rules, we see this where I don't want to pick on any one vertical, but let's call it a bank. if you're working at a bank and you're trying to work on the business rules and you're going, okay, we can send people credit products and mortgage products and all these savings accounts, checking accounts. Well, who wins in a tie? Right? If the business rules say, the propensity model says this person should get an offer for a credit card, but then you walk in and go, yeah, I'm mortgage, I get to do whatever I want. Do you squash what the model said? So I think that's where the crossover comes for different organizations being in a different place for their ability to do that, is that the business rules hierarchy, if you don't have a common goal of what we're all trying to accomplish, then I think the business rule hierarchy gets in the way of it for some organizations. And I'm not saying it really happened in a bank, I'm just using that as an example.
We've seen it in loyalty, we've seen it
We see it all over the place.
other verticals as well. So just to switch gears, Ariel, you're in a bit more of a unique position than either Aubrey or Scott here, because being owned and operated out of the European Union and focusing, having to be GDPR compliant and those types of things, it gives a bit of a different perspective maybe on your business and stuff. So how do you work? How do you see legislation like the GDPR sort of being on the forefront of this new dawn of personal data ownership changing? We've seen Brazil come out with their law, which is sort of GDPR. We've seen the California Consumer Privacy Act. We're expecting a federal legislation in the U.S. At some point in the future, we may see that get updated. It's long overdue, but it's likely coming. Where do you see the play on data analytics, data usage for all the stuff we've been talking about in the future versus data privacy for the individual, and how do you find that balance? That's a big question.
Yeah, that is a big question. I think as a European-based company, GDPR was a huge undertaking for us. We really invested a lot in it. Our platform is compliant from end to end, GDPR, and we've also been, obviously Castle supportive and from the compliance side, but we're seeing two different things that sometimes conflict. So retention versus erase. I think as I'm actually discussing our future with regards to AI and so on, these subjects come up all the time, right? What can we keep? What do we need to sort of erase? What do we anonymize in our data? There's no clear answer today, and we don't have the answer where we're really we discuss it in depth, and sometimes we bring it up to legal counsel, and what's really interesting is the difference in opinions coming from different jurisdictions. So it is a minefield. We're going to be in this minefield for a while with every single country now and some states that are starting to implement their own. I think what I took down as a note today is that this is actually making us better marketers. When Castle hit, it actually hit our bottom line. We actually were on our model initially was very much based on volumes. We've actually changed that model. We don't look at it that way anymore. But my 4-year forecast or 3-year forecast at the time just got flattened out. Everybody just. But the flip side of it is the level of engagement we're getting. The improvement in deliverability is amazing. Just by being compliant, you're improving your entire program from one end to the other. So as we move forward, and we're taking an approach, instead of being afraid of this, we're embracing it. And I think some of the challenges we will see when I was talking about these ecosystems that are, what's called the API ecosystem, where everybody's connecting to each other. This is where it stays tricky, because not all platforms will be as compliant as others. So when you look at integrating a third-party platform and so on, all those questions should be evaluated, reviewed, and so on. And as we move forward, that's not going to get easier. It's going to get significantly more complex. Hopefully, the software will help us keep it sane, and we'll build into the tools a lot, as we're doing now. A lot of, as we said, we keep it simple. We have a full GDPR compliance interface built into the system. It doesn't affect our Canadian clients as much, but in Europe, it's definitely, we've seen a lot of traction.
So great.
Just hold on to your hats, because it's not over yet.
So I'd like to open it up for questions, if there are any. Yep.
Ariel, you mentioned. Thank you. Ariel, you mentioned a little while back that AI is the hot term on everybody's minds. I wonder if you can get in, or any of you can get into some of the best executions you've seen using AI, or some of the best ideas going forward.
That was there.
It's an excellent question, because I'm constantly looking for the examples to inspire us. I think one of the, as I was saying, one of the best examples we found that actually could translate into a product right away is today, we have an approach to tagging data, to making the data in your messages relevant to a machine, if that makes any sense. So we're making it relevant for humans first, but how many of you tag all your images and every single link with metadata today? So, but do it exactly. What I found coming from the content management world before is that we could train everybody to tag data, but humans are inherently, we tag everything instinctively, but translating that into a system and putting the right data there, it failed in most projects. We had a few very, very solid, let's call it, people working on content that did this religiously, but most people sort of forgot or became pretty lazy in the process. Where I think AI is going to be really, really efficient, because it's a bit of a boring task, is tagging all your data in your place. And as of course it's an iterative process, so as we're doing this and feeding back into the machine, it gets better at tagging over time. So this is the first, I think, real benefit we'll see is in the production and making sure our data is tagged. Our data is much more relevant, and by making it more relevant, when we start teaching the machines love relevant data. They have a hard time with the fuzzy stuff when it's, they can actually make mistakes. So you need to filter the noise out from the image. And a good friend of mine who's building a machine learning system that's analyzing trees from satellite to every single data set he gets that enriches his learning machine improves his performance by 1 or 2% every time. But he's now hitting 80-90% accuracy, whereas just a year and a half ago, we're talking about 60% accuracy. So I think we're going to see the same type of iterative, make the data better, and machine learning will follow. There's going to be a big boom eventually, but we're not there yet. 3 to 5 years, I would say, until we actually see this being extremely efficient. We're starting by let's walk before we run.
I think some of the things we talked about earlier and how the complexion of the inbox is changing. I think Scott was talking about before. It'll be fewer emails from mom and dad kind of thing, and more from people like us. I think what that means is that the behavior around interaction with the inbox is going to change. People might not check their email every single day and that sort of thing. To extend beyond that, what I was talking about as far as different channels and having a sort of cohesive ecosystem and life cycle with multiple touch points and that sort of thing. I feel that one of the earlier things we'll probably start to see is AI around when and where to send information. So that's sort of one thing that I think is probably sooner rather than later in the evolution of AI as it applies to our world. The other thing that I've seen that is currently in the world today in terms of AI is with chat technology. So this is less to do, I guess, with email, but in my world, which is effectively ticketing for theater, it's a very complex process to buy tickets, but artificial intelligence is currently being used, certain players, certainly on Broadway, to guide a person through the entire purchase process for tickets and that sort of thing. So I think, again, when you're thinking about where your email leads, when you're from, if you're talking voice, if Alexa's going to read your email and you want to act on it and make a purchase and that sort of thing, I feel like that's where artificial intelligence is going to again extend the experience from being on the email.
I'm good. I'm all good. Hard pass.
Doesn't exist.
So we talked a little bit today about, someone touched on change management. You talked about defining organizational goals that are unified. So this concept of OKRs is actually quite old, but since we have some agency, law agency experience up here, and now those unified goals, what do you want to work towards, trickles all the way down to execution that you talked about, Scott, to test methodologies, all of that, right? So we can get lost in the weeds if we don't have a real clear vision. Let's say that's cultural from the top down and bottom up. But do you have any strategies you can share or examples about how we can shift? Let's say I'm a consultant. Often we're in that situation where top management, they want to go IPO, or they're already public, they're all about growth. They only care about revenue today, tomorrow, next month. They don't have that vision for customer lifetime value, which ultimately shifts a lot of the execution and the strategy that trickles down to email marketing. Yeah. So if that's something you can speak to about how to, it might be change management, but how to change that mental shift in thinking from management, which really has a huge impact on what we all do here.
Yeah, and there's no easy shortcut to that. I think the good news is that the data is so much more available now and can be quantified more that whatever that hot button is, a company that's trying to go public and looking at their top line revenue growth as opposed to their profitability to at least show the market, or a VC that's trying to invest in that company to get a turnaround, or a more established company that's just breaking into something new, maybe even opening a new market that they haven't done before. The data is more quantifiable now, so it's trying to figure out as a consultant what the win is there. And sometimes, again, it might not be a what you do, it's a what you don't do type of thing. So I brought up ABM because ABM is now hitting a bit more of a maturity curve, even though ABM is really just sales, and it's been around for several thousand years, since whoever sold the first rock to the guy next door. It's been around for a long time, but the data around ABM and ABM as a strategy is now becoming more quantifiable. So you're able to pull out to someone who says, I just want the sales reps to do what they do, and I want marketing to fill the top of the funnel. But then if you show them ABM data that says, when marketing is involved in marketing to an organization, that organization performs better XYZ, sales close faster, the average order value goes up. All of those things are quantifiable now that they weren't, certainly on the ABM side, not that long ago. Doing things like, and I mentioned earlier, like one of the things that I think is a big future win for email that's just, in some ways it's just really starting, is using email data to inform other decisions. Where email used to be the end of the chain, lots of decisions were made, a segmented list got sent out, 3 versions of content, and away you went. But now being able to take email data and feed that back around to the group that's doing the media buy and say, here's an audience that we have direct response from. We know exactly who they are, we know what they do, we know how they do it. So buy people like that in your media. And here's an audience that we have that never does anything we want them to do. Don't buy people like that in your media. So especially for a company that's looking, maybe a smaller company that needs to be really careful about where they spend the money, that email data is relatively easy to get and it informs those other decisions. Social and other digital ad spaces are ones that we really see being able to get quick wins off of to align people into that scenario. Do buy people who look like this, don't buy people who look like that. Completely changes the dynamic of a company working with their media organization. Those are just, off the top of my head, those are quick wins that we look for that are quantifiable quick wins, not conceptual quick wins. If that makes sense.
I think fear works as well. When I first came into the organization, email was a quick way to boost the day's sales, basically. And we had 0 policies around, frequency, and the content that we were sending, one show in every single email, that sort of thing. And so in order to make that shift and get the buy-in from people above me to say that we can't just send an email whenever we want to boost the day sales or whatever it is we want the sales for a particular show. We need to think about this, because if we keep going the way we're going, we won't have an email list effectively. And I showed them basically how quickly or how short that runway really was based on the attrition rates and all that. So fear.
So we have time for 1 or 2 more questions.
Everybody's looking at the window at the snow, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to start setting people up if we don't have any more questions.
I think, okay, well, there's no more questions. I guess we'll just sort of look in closing, maybe a thought from each of you about, where are we going as an industry? Where are we going as organizations that are focused on email, or even teams that are focused on email? And just sort of, how do we look, take the crystal ball out and look into the future and say, maybe some of those fear things, if you're not doing this, you're not going to succeed, you may not be here in 5 years. That may not be the right example. If email's not going anywhere, I'm going to say that. But, where do you see the industry roles changing? A lot of times you always hear, if there's a mistake, well, the intern did it. Why did you let your intern send your email campaign?
That one yesterday.
44 to 1 ROI, right? Like, it's your biggest earner. Where do you see sort of that? Maybe we'll just start at this end and work our way. Oh, we'll start at that.
Yeah.
Work our way this way.
I got a good person. So Aubrey can do my stuff. I think I would, focus on what I mentioned earlier. I think email as a hub for engagement models, not as a channel to deploy in, I think is where I see that already happening, but I think if we look at growth for the next 3 years, I think that's where email has a lot of ability. And I made the comment earlier, email's come out of the shadow a little bit of the old spam type of scenario, and it's showing value. I think a lot of that's coming from the data from email being pushed back upstream and showing value, the data to be able to decide what to do and what not to do with an audience that is not anonymous, it's known. I mean, how much, you can't get much closer to the data. So I think for the next 3 years and going forward, I see a lot of growth surrounding email as a leverageable data source for downstream data and a data creation source going upstream. And I think a lot of that comes down to that small data discussion and knowing that there's so much data there to do so much more with. I think email has benefited from email coming downstream. I think other systems are now benefiting from email data going back upstream. AI and things like that. Did my mic get cut? Did my music's playing? I gotta take my. I think like if I look at the near future of it, like email isn't going away. It's going from strength to strength. It always has. It's evolved and changed in this space. Anybody remember RSS feeds? They were gonna kill email. How'd that work out? We're not up here talking about the future of RSS, I guess. So I think if I look forward for the next 3-4 years, the cultural change around email, it's not the end of the chain, it's a valuable part of the chain. The concept of email as an engagement hub type of model, being able to leverage email into doing social better, being able to leverage email into doing ad better and web and all those other things, and not being the end of the channel anymore. I think that's the largest growth that we're going to see. And the comment I made earlier is I agree that most of the people who are very focused on email should be digital champions inside their organization, because the work you're doing and the data that you're generating and your intimacy with the people on the list is so much better than anybody who works in more of an anonymous eyeball generating type of media. We know so much more than that side of the organization. Not to say that it's unnecessary, but it's different. And I think the ability for people in this space to inform that as opposed to just being a destination off of whatever reach media got done, I think that from a cultural point of view is a massive opportunity for anybody who's operating in this space.
We see the trend definitely moving from batch and blast to building customer journeys, reaching out to more than one channel. This is actually reaching into customer experience and service design, which is very interesting for us, that we're actually seeing meetings where we used to be uniquely speaking to sometimes marketing, we're actually seeing service designers and CX people that are involved now in these processes. So I think this is definitely gone from a blast type communication to really personalized. This is happening now. We've been talking about it for a long time because we love this, but this is where we are, and moving forward, I really my feeling is we're really going to be talking about customer experience, and that's fantastic for us versus just a simple, send a whole batch, measure, what did you learn, and watch repeat. Yeah, so journeys are fascinating. Also, they generate a lot of data, a lot of very precise data on how people are behaving, and I think that's really the next steps. AI is going to come and help us with that as we go.
I just want to say I couldn't have said it better myself.
You already used that one. Yeah, I know you did.
But I do, largely tend to agree with the sentiments being shared there. I think that, a move from calling email to CRM, I think is one thing, and I also think the people in our, with our jobs and our responsibilities in organizations will, I think, tend to expand into other areas as well because of all the insights and opportunities that are available to us through the work that we do each day. That's all I got. Let's go with that.
Victor, you be careful.
I know.
Haven't done your review this year yet. I'm just kidding, Victor.
Actually, a question this group here.
It's a group question? Okay. Is it for Aubrey?
The question is, can I email you my resume?
I've already got his resume.
Basically, we're asking how do you find talent, and what's, if I understood correctly, like how do you hire developers? How do you find talent? And is it difficult? Is it easy? What's the best way for someone from this group to get into email marketing?
There was a few questions in there, I think. How do I find talent? Depends what group we're hiring into. Like for a company like ours, we're at our heart, we're a service company. So we operate the platforms on behalf of our clients, but then the team, which Victor is a part of, who works directly with the clients, needs to understand the side of what they want to accomplish and have enough technical savvy to be able to map that back to a technology, but to be more focused on the marketer and what the marketer's trying to do. So on the technology side, in some ways it's really hard because there's not as many qualified people around as you'd like to be. But on the other side, it's relatively easy to screen them because you know exactly what you want, right? They need to have a certain set of skills. They need to have certifications on certain platforms and those types of things for a company like ours. And I'm sure this is a different view. On the other side, it's a lot harder. But I think it's getting easier because again, people who have come up through email without maybe some of the stigma of people like Matt and I that have been at it for a long time, we had to go through a lot of creating the industry. So I think finding talent on that side is getting a little easier because we can focus on what do you want to accomplish. So people who've worked with or in organizations that have been able to drill into a measurable view of what they're trying to accomplish. To be able to take the creative process and to be able to take the data and thought process and drive all those things back to something measurable. That's what we would be looking for when it comes to more of the client engagement side of the business. Again, I think on the other side, on the technical side, finding people with good skills on a platform, people with good understanding of data, people with a good understanding of how data powers marketing without necessarily being marketers. I think those are the things that we look for. As far as finding them, mostly just leave the light on at night and hope they'll come by. So far it's not working as fast as I'd like. But.
I would maybe agree with that. Like 15 years ago, deliverability services wasn't a thing. We kind of had to invent it as we went.
Yeah.
The question came from us here because we are email developers. We are actually making this email work because functionality and everything around email wouldn't work if the email doesn't display correctly.
Yeah.
And the problem is that we will not find these people necessarily because most of us come from web development. And I know a lot of web developers, they do not want to touch email.
Yeah.
They think it's witchcraft.
Witchcraft?
There's a lot of email developers that working in closet and don't even want to admit that they're doing that.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting side of it. Like there, to some extent, we can teach people about the platforms. We can't necessarily teach them about the nuances of developing email and what it looks like and how it interacts and those types of things. We can point people at a platform and say, go get certified on this. The other thing that I would say, and I think is getting a little bit easier to find is there are people who are passionate about email now. And I think that's really good. And we're finding that whether it's client-facing people or technology people, we're finding people who want to be in the industry. They may not always call it email, but they look at, Aubrey mentioned CRM. Email kind of was part of CRM, and then it wasn't part of CRM, and now it's CRM again. And now they're synonymous, but not always, but not really, but kind of on some days, mostly on Wednesdays, that type of thing. But people are coming in with more passion for where it fits and what it can do, and whether that's a developer or a client-facing person. I think that's helping to bring on more qualified people, but often just more passionate people who are coming in like us, is willing to invest in and train and bring them up to speed on the things that are a little bit more tactical, because you can't teach the passion for it.